Now this is a buried alive story that you have never heard of. I have found the cemetery. I don't know if the grave is marked or not, but we are going to go check it out. Not only does this buried alive story come from my hometown, but it appears that it did gain traction almost 100 years ago. So the story itself, we're going to look into it, but this went so far as to launch an inquest by the courts into what really happened. You know, I have heard of stories like this in the past, and I've traveled great distances to tell them, and little did I know something like this was in my backyard. But my goodness, what a story. And you know, the way it all went down, it is a little shocking how the end actually turned out on this story. So I have done a lot of research on this. We're going to go to the cemetery, Grayson Cemetery, and sometimes it's referred to as Old Grayson Cemetery because a lot of the history through this small town runs through this cemetery. And wow, what a story that I have found. We are going to go through the facts that we have and take a look at this story together. Today we make our way to Old Grayson Cemetery in Grayson, Kentucky. In this cemetery, the final remains of Susie Vickers are laid to rest. To understand why we are here and how this story came to be, we must do a little backstory. On my channel, I have told buried alive stories before, and every time it has been a word-of-mouth legend and folklore. For the first time on my channel in doing a buried alive story, there is a paper trail. Not only a paper trail, but this event actually made it to the courts. And yes, charges were filed. Susie Vickers was 63 years old and lived in the neighboring community of Denton, Kentucky. Ms. Vickers would die suddenly without warning. On her death certificate, the cause of death would be listed as sudden, unknown. Her date of death, March 27th, 1930. Her date of burial would be 2 days later, March 29th, 1930. The place of burial is listed as Grayson Cemetery, where we are today. Other than no official cause of death, nothing on the certificate is out of the ordinary. Everything appears normal. Grayson Cemetery is where nearly all of the townspeople of the day were laid to rest, and although Ms. Vickers lived in Denton, it appears that she would work in Grayson. She would clean house for a local dentist. It is said that she was so well thought of in Grayson that people would refer to her as Aunt Susie, so when she passed, it was a shock. There was another trait of Susie Vickers, other than her kindness. It was said in the newspapers of the day covering this story that she was known to have fainting spells and remain in a coma for hours when this occurred. While preparing the evening meal for her family on March 27th, Ms. Vickers collapsed, stricken with what was an apparent heart attack. She was pronounced dead. The body would be brought to Grayson at the Baptist Church for funeral services. Here is where things start getting a little odd. Rumors began swirling that while at the funeral service, Miss Vickers' head produced moisture and had to be wiped off twice as if she was sweating. Those rumors would make their way to Catlettsburg, Kentucky, including the sister of the dentist that Ms. Vickers worked for. It appears that the sister was actually friends with Ms. Vickers, and she felt that there had been some sort of foul play here, perhaps by the husband. The accusation landed heavily, so heavily that a grand jury convened to investigate the allegations. On one hand, you had the evidence of a death certificate and a burial 2 days later that would say if she had a pulse, surely 2 days would have been long enough to notice she was still living. On the other hand, how do you explain the moisture? It would be up to a grand jury to sort out all of the facts and evidence. So would an indictment be handed down? Yes, there was an indictment, but it may not be what you think. The grand jury could not find enough evidence to substantiate that Ms. Vickers had been buried alive. So what about the indictment? There would be an indictment handed down for slander to Mrs. George B. Clay, the sister of the dentist who made the claims against Ms. Vickers' husband. I combed through every news article that I could find on this. I can see a scenario where this occurring was swept under the rug, but I can also see a scenario where this was just a case of gossip and hysteria. The story has been lost to history. Also lost to history is the exact site of Ms. Vickers' grave, which is somewhere here in Grayson Cemetery in Grayson, Kentucky. A few things here: I could not find the indictment of Mrs. Clay or if she ever faced the charges. I also could not find any information about Ms. Vickers' husband after this. Again, these are facts that have been lost to history. If you like cemetery and history videos, please subscribe and join me for more. Also search for Whit Docs on Facebook. We have a great community there, and I'm about to start my new postcard series. Details will be on the Facebook page. Once again, from Old Grayson Cemetery in Grayson, Kentucky, I will see you again soon.